Hello, welcome everyone. Aisha Kennedy, Shakti Creative Power. I've been having these conversations with amazing women who are really helping us to unpack and explore what true power is. It's not the power that we see out there in the world, and there is a shift happening, as I'm sure that a lot of you feel. And I'm having conversations with women in their area of expertise that is helping us to step more fully into our true power. And today, my guest is Raquel Dubois from Embodied Presence Training. And she is an expert, a specialist on nervous system work. And I'm not going to go into all the details. She has a lot of qualifications under her belt, but you can look up. I'm going to have that in the notes so that you can look her up. You can explore what she's doing. You can listen to her videos and get a real sense of what it is. But today, I want to just dive right in with Raquel and explore what this work is and how it can benefit us, whether we're in business or just in our personal lives, how this can really help benefit us. So welcome, Raquel. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thanks,
Been
Aisha.
looking forward to this for a long time. And what I wanted to explore right away is, a lot of us women who are in the online space, we've created businesses, we consider ourselves entrepreneurs, and we come up against these issues, which I think are very common. And the women I work with, is especially it's common, is visibility or boundaries, perfectionism, like wanting to get everything right before they can even move forward. And I know that you've worked with clients and you have some examples that I'd love you to share some examples of how this work has actually helped them, even if they didn't focus on that initially.
Yes, that's true. In several rounds of the expansion training program, which is my group program that I've run, women have reported changes in their habits that they had been working on for quite like a number of years. One case I'm thinking of was a lady who'd been working on trying to actually address her insomnia for 9 years. Another person was trying to bring in a more of a healthy diet and lifestyle and exercise regime, and had been doing that for a number of years as well, probably a couple of decades actually, and really had given up on that ever being able to shift. And the same with the lady with the insomnia. And both of them said to me during the course of the training that whilst they hadn't set an intention, and they had certainly hadn't even spoken about this issue, like me and the other women had no idea that that was actually something that that they wanted to change. But they said that during the course of the program, those things started to change, and quite dramatically for the person who had the sleep issues. Her sleep issues completely changed, and she was quite quite excited about what the potentiality for what it could mean for her to be able to be with her family and be a bit more present, because those sleep issues were really draining her energy and her ability to be with her children. And also it did actually change quite a lot in that she was able to start getting clarity around what she wanted to birth as far as a new business, because she'd closed a in-person business and she wanted to move online, but she couldn't translate what she was doing online to in-person to online. So she wanted to actually birth something new. So getting more sleep and getting good quality sleep allowed for so many things, both personally and professionally, for her to start to change. And it wasn't just like, we often think, oh, okay, I got more clear-headed because I'm sleeping better. There's so much more happening at a level of, let's say, the mechanics of our body that we don't have control of it over, and we don't know when they're affecting us. So, we can't get in there and control our temperature regulation. We can't get in there and control how many beats per minute our heart makes, or what is happening with our respiratory system or our elimination system, or, our sweat glands. We can't control any of those things. And those things are controlled by our autonomic nervous system. So they're all happening. And if a lot more effort and energy is being used by our body to kind of keep those processes at a level that we can kind of function without feeling completely fatigued or completely drained or anything like that, then they're using a lot more of our energy to do that. So there's much less energy available for things like dreaming, for creating, for being more free, for being more connected. So it's not just about taking something off your plate and saying, oh, I'll do less of that, or I'll have a rest day, right? This is actually about really changing the kinds of stuff that's going on at a level that you really have apparently no influence on, but that if you make other changes and influences, that nervous system will actually calm down to a point where it's only using a minimum required amount of energy rather than a much larger amount of energy to do the same sort of functions. So you mentioned about perfectionism, Aisha, and that kind of like leads straight into it, is that people suffer with things like comparisonitis, right? They say, well, why can she do it and I can't? You know, they look at that and they say, well, she's got children, or she's got, you know, a busy job, or she's working, you know, all those hours and everything else. Why can't I feel like I have enough energy to do the same sort of thing? Why can't I be more present online? Because if I were more present online, I could have the same rewards, right? And it's actually really at a nervous system level. And so we can beat ourselves up about not being able to, and comparing ourselves, and then kind of developing all those kind of perfectionistic kind of character. Well, if I worked harder, or if I were better, or if I did this more, or whatever. And so what that does is it actually loads the nervous system even more.
Yeah. It's like trying to do an outside strategy because we don't know. We don't know. Like this work that you're bringing through is, I think, sort of, I mean, it's old work, but it's relatively new in the consciousness of a lot of us. And when we're feeling like something's not working, something's not right, we're going out trying to get other strategies to put into place that we think we need. And in fact, it's more the inner strategies that you're working with, right? The nervous system. I mean, how much more inner can you get than that
Yeah.
physical inner system, and working with that? So I'm wondering, like, you know, like people go to mindset work a lot. So why is this different? Is this a deeper work, or does it work in conjunction with mindset work?
So one of the things that, you know, therapists and academics and stuff like to talk about is things like top-down processes or bottom-up processes, okay? So it's a little bit of a technical term, but I think you kind of get the idea that a top-down process works at the level of the mind first, and hopefully then sort of filters down and makes changes on the downwards trajectory. So through the mental realm, the emotional realm, and then hopefully making some kind of physical behavioral change, right? So that's how, where mindset thinks about it as behavior. So a bottom-up approach goes beyond behavior, so it goes lower than where a mindset approach could actually go. So it starts at the level of being with the body, being with the sensations, and building your neural pathways so that you can observe and track what's really going on in your body. Now, all of us, right, regardless of kind of your level of expertise, there'll be always times that we speed up over what's actually happening in our body, skip it over. So even if we're inclined to slow down and pay attention, there'll be plenty of times that we don't, right? So it's those sorts of moments where we think, oh, there we go, there I go, there's my pattern of racing over what's really going on for myself because I think I'm supposed to be something or get somewhere. That's actually where we pay attention and say, okay, so what is happening? Not so that we can analyze it and figure it out. It's simply about building presence. So a lot happens when you build presence with your body and just slow down and stop, because your body isn't necessarily always trying to get messages across, but it is always telling you what's going on. Okay, so there's a difference between saying, you know, there's no alarm going on in my body, for example, about where I am right now, but there's plenty going on. And if I allow a little bit of my awareness to move away from this conversation and pop into my body, I can notice quite a lot of energy moving around in a few different places. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's a little, like, oh, I wasn't actually aware of that. There's energy streaming in my legs and kind of like popping. I can feel like little popping going on. I'm like, that's actually not that common. So there's something happening. Now, it doesn't mean anything necessarily. Like, it's not trying to tell me, oh, I'm too hot, for example, make a temperature change or something. But if I can actually just observe the waves that happen in my nervous system, a kind of a relationship of trust starts to build between me and my body. And also those neural pathways that we're really trying to establish about noticing what's happening in my body, they become more and more and more refined, right? To be able to notice them while I'm doing 20 things is very different to sitting in stillness and noticing, right? So a lot of us have that ability to sit in stillness. Not everybody, but a lot of people can do that. And I'm talking about really being aware in every single moment of multiple aspects of experience. So when we're aware of more than multiple aspects of our experience, we start to get an idea of ourselves as more whole. So when we talk about healing and wholeness, what we're really talking about is understanding more aspects of our experience and more aspects of our consciousness in each moment, right? And as we do that, there's this whole sense of, oh, I am really here. All of me is really here. And those parts that don't get seen, which is whatever these little poppy parts, right? Let's call them just little poppy parts that don't get seen, they're now being seen, right? And that means that there's more of me that can relate to the universe, right? So
Yeah,
both so it's and it's not just metaphysical, but that's a metaphysical way of understanding it, right? And then that kind of experiential, actual way is like, there's more of me here now. So there's more of me that can connect, even though I might kind of like at this kind of, let's say, mindset level, feel like I'm just as connected to you. There's actually something else happening in my body because our nervous systems are designed to talk to each other. And that doesn't necessarily mean our mind knows what nervous systems are saying, but that's what energy is, right? When people talk about, oh, I felt that and I was really drawn to your work, or I was really drawn to having a reading with that person, or I knew I had to move to Barcelona or whatever, right? That's energy, but actually what goes on there is this whole conversation with the nervous system, and not just between human nervous systems, between animal nervous systems, the nervous systems of countries, of the world, of the planet, right? All of those, there's all nervous systems in kind of micro and macro level that all have an interaction with each other. Yeah. Again, a bit metaphysical, but also exciting.
Yeah, it is. I love how you're describing presence, and also that, as you were saying, all the nervous systems around us, like, it's that interconnectedness that we know is there, but we don't actually focus on that a whole lot, not on that really visceral level that you're talking about. And, when you were talking, it was like when you take care of those things and you expand in yourself, you can talk a little bit about this, but like, a lot of women hold circles or they hold programs for other people. And I would imagine that, working with you in this way and in your own system helps expand your capacity to hold space or hold a container, whatever you want to call it, for other people that you're working with.
Yeah, and that is absolutely the main intention behind my expansion training, is for people who are holding space for others, and also holding space for ideas and creations and transformation of the world and the planet, right? So there's all of those ways that we hold space. I've had musicians and thought leaders and change makers come through my program, as well as therapists and body-oriented practitioners and things like that. So it's anybody who really essentially, in a couple of cases, there were people who were just holding space for themselves, right? Yeah. So, we're all holding space in different ways, and to actually, know that wherever we are on our nervous system scale and whatever we're doing, we're actually learning how to build more presence, and so we can hold more space.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm familiar a little bit about your work and I just get more and more curious. And I've heard you say that, this whole thing is not something you can really describe because it's a felt sense, right? It's something you feel. You can't even really put words to it, but we have to because, we have language and we try to describe things. But when I hear you talk about that felt sense, it reminds me a little bit of my own background work, which is coming through the yogic, field where I align with the Shakti nature, and Shakti, the creative energy, is really aligned to those unspoken things that can't be described. Their body senses, their intuition, and it's that kind of energy that I feel like we're returning to, and that it's very, very necessary actually for us to return to that. So, for empaths, for empathic people, and for people who are highly sensitive and they feel very deeply, I really feel like these are gifts, and I'm one of those people. And for a lot of my life, I felt it was a bit of a curse because I couldn't navigate myself in the world. But I want to address that in a way because, this work that you're doing is about feeling. And so if you're listening to this and you think, but I already feel so much now, I don't want to feel anything more, what would you say to that?
Well, I actually got a message yesterday from a new client talking about exactly that. So in the session that I worked with her, we worked around this intense feeling that she tends to have over. There's a lot of intensity when it comes to feeling. On any level, there's intensity. So nervous system work, like other kind of therapies, often looks at changing behavior, changing established patterns, right? Changing what is familiar. So if we say, well, what's familiar to this person's body is intense feeling, how about we explore what might happen if we backed off the intensity while the emotion is actually there? Right? Because there's a kind of coupling effect that happens between an emotion and the intensity, right? And that and while it's coupled, the person thinks when I say back off the intensity, that means they can't feel anymore, right? And a lot of empaths have that concern, right? But when you actually work at a nervous system level, you can uncouple intensity from emotion or from kinesthetic awareness, whichever you're talking about if you're empathic. But I'm talking about emotion just in this moment. And they can still hold and be with the emotion, which we can be together because that's our holding space for the emotion, while also saying, gee, okay, I'm having a very different relationship with intensity right now. And can I explore that on a somatic level? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. Did you just kind of, yeah, like give it more space? That's what it feels like to really explore. And yeah, I think that's really helpful because I think that's one of the, maybe not even a conscious fear of people who feel a lot of things, that perhaps doing this sort of work would actually intensify the feelings. And
Yes.
that's not what it's about at
It's
all.
true. People do come to me with those concerns that it might be too much because often their experience of the world is too much. I can tell you, it was my experience from an infant that feeling was too much. So I had, these classic what they call somatization responses, which was every time I had an emotion, I had pain in my body, and that was actually established from infancy, because there was no other way that I was able to relate to my environment, because my environment wasn't very relational to me. So what happened is I just felt it all in my body, and then that just became the habitual pattern. And so it just became more and more and more intense in my system. It became a whole, every time that there's emotions in the environment, I feel it in my body. And the connection between language, because it started in infancy, I didn't have language for it, and it took years and years, I mean, I was sort of at work as an adult, and I was working in the health field where there was quite a lot of distressed people, coming, and I was wondering why I was just in tears all the time and really in pain. I was in intense pain all the time because every time I kind of picked up an emotion, I felt it in my body, and then I would cry about it. So the emotions came, my emotions came after the pain. So that's why the body oriented was the right way approach, right? So the emotions sort of sit somewhere in the middle of taking the information in from the mind and analyzing it and creating a story around it, and therefore the emotions, right? Or we can come in from the bottom where we can feel the sensations, which then create an experience that might actually cause an emotion and a story, right? So they're in the middle, and I can see why there's been so much attention given to emotions and emotional processing over the years. But we need to actually be understanding that those emotions actually come from a story that's created, and it's not necessarily a story that's created from the mind first. So the story actually is interpreted from the mind, from the body's experience.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's a two-way. So I'm not saying that it only ever goes that way. The mind and the emotions and the body do kind of like interact and share information. But there's a lot of information. In fact, 80% of our nerves go from the gut up to the brain, not down the other way. Okay, so we can probably estimate that probably around 80% of information travels from the body and from sensation up to the brain for the brain to analyze it and say, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Oh, here's the story, here's the narrative, here's my emotion, right? 80% of the time, it's probably working like that.
Yeah, that just makes so much sense, not just in a mental way, but in a true experience of it. I'm sure that, even if you're listening to this, you can know those times where there's discomfort in the body, and instead of staying present with that sensation or that feeling, that immediately the mind takes over and creates a story, and that story becomes more dominant or prominent in our experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, it's really, it's so seductive, right? I mean, it's so seductive to have a story. And even myself, I can find myself, oh, I don't know why I'm having that experience. But, then it's like, well, actually, I'm having that experience. So can I actually, it's like the popping thing. I don't know why, but that's gone now, right? There was no message there. And so sometimes we have to actually trust that there's just stuff going on in our body that isn't necessarily all about, tracking every single minutiae, but it is about just being present with as much as we can.
Yeah. Being present and not having to know. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is a gift of the work that you do and that I do, is just being able to be in that space of not knowing and be okay with that, to feel
Yeah.
safe in that. Yeah.
It's really, and that's really hard for people. It's really, really hard. I mean, I've been there a number of times myself in terms of where I recognize that I was at a critical juncture in my healing, that I had to let go of what I was hanging on to, and that I didn't have anything else there at that time. Like, there was somebody with me, fortunately, but there was going to be at least a moment where I was going to be in free fall and had nothing to hang on to, and that even if I took their hand, I didn't know if it was going to be the right thing. I didn't know if it was going to actually help me feel better, right? And there's times when it's been with others, or there's times when it's been, just in my life and with spirit. There's been a number of occasions where I felt like I just had to abandon the knowing, and I just had to let go of what I already knew. So it's not, when we say knowing, I want to free that up for not just that kind of mental thing. It's just knowing what you already know.
Yeah.
So it's not just all about, the mind, and all about what you're thinking, right? Sometimes it's just simply, this is what's most familiar to me. I've just recently, this is my most recent exciting thing that I'm holding for myself at the moment. And I don't know if you if you recall, and I can't remember the exact saying, but there used to be a saying, something like past performance predicts the future, something like that. And I'm playing with the idea that past performance does not predict future outcomes. So that we, exactly, so that, you know, like, because that's actually how the mind works, on the basis of, well, it worked like that before, so the probability of it working like that again is really high. I mean, it actually does that even with gambling and things like that, but that's actually what the mind does. That's why we spend so much time analyzing, because and reflecting on the past, because we're using that in order to inform our choices for the future. And that's actually how the mind is programmed. But I'm like, do you know what? What also happens when you get really caught up in that is that's going to be the only real outcome you can possibly get, is what happened in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
And it's so limiting, isn't it? Really?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really limiting. And so, and I know that people would do that sort of work with, you know, maybe manifestation work, and I feel very aligned to the work of Esther and Jerry Hicks. That sort of, you know, law of attraction work is in really good alignment with my work. It's a little different, but really well aligned. There's only kind of one aspect of it, which is on the aspect of contrast, that I feel is different in nervous system work. But other than that, I just like, there's just a perfect synergistic alignment, I feel. But yeah, this I don't know, it's kind of juicy to me at a nervous system level to program this idea in my nervous system, because it's biologically, rather than just on the level of, oh, I can convince myself that I can have a different outcome. How can I actually start to program my nervous system, which is completely against its biological nature, to actually anticipate something surprising, something new?
Yeah. Oh, that's very exciting.
It is
And
exciting.
that's actually creative too. I mean, that
Yeah,
is what creativity is about, isn't it? It's the creative process is like allowing for something that you wouldn't expect to happen and opening up to that and allowing that to come into
yeah,
your experience. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, so exciting. Now, I want to, before we close out, I really want you to just a little briefly explain. I know you have a training coming up, I think,
Mhm.
another embodied expansion training,
Yes.
and just maybe a few elements, because I know you put your heart and soul into your work,
Mm.
and that this program can, if people are feeling this calling, that I want to give them the opportunity to connect with you on this. So if you could just give a little bit of
Sure.
what that's going to be
Yeah,
about.
I'd love to share that. So it's actually a fusion of shamanic and earth-based practices, because I was trained by two shaman, in one in Guatemala and one in Bali. They chose me as an initiate, and I was kind of like pulled into some very interesting village shamanic healing processes. I also trained at university. I studied shamanism, you know, from an academic and intellectual perspective as well. So I bring in these ideas of shamanic principles, not practices, because, or not, I don't teach anybody to be a shaman. I'm really, really clear that that would be cultural appropriation. And I do teach in the course about what is culturally appropriate, what is sustainable, and what is, you know, and what can come through. But what I've discovered through my various trainings in shamanism is that there's this whole interconnectedness that is what the real element of shamanism is, between interconnectedness and altered states of consciousness. And these two elements work really well with the nervous system. Okay, so I've fused the nervous system training with shamanic flavor, if you like, right? So we do things like explore auditory gateways and how that affects our nervous system, and it's really quite remarkable. You know, I'll have 10 or 12 women on the training. This time, actually, I'm opening up to aligned men as well, by the way. So it's actually not just women for this particular training. So I'll have 10 people or 12 people on the training, and each of them will have a really different experience. of these auditory gateways. You know, some won't even be able to notice the gateway. That's their nervous system and how that works, right? They're like, well, that's a piece of music. You know, I've recently been doing some research into musical, and I think it said anhedonia, musical anhedonia, and that is somebody who can take pleasure from going for picnics or, you know, making a nice meal or going to the movies, but can't see any pleasure at all in music. They're like, how can that be fun, right? So this, and what we're able to discover is that that's about the social engagement nervous system. So, you know, how I can actually apply then that research to helping people's the nervous system of connection, basically. The social nervous system is the nervous system of connection. How can we actually help that come more online? And so that's actually what the whole shamanic nervous system thing is all about, helping people's social and connected nervous system come more online. And when that happens, they get more connected to their own bodies, to their self, to their partners and others, and dear beloved others, and their community and spirit. So that's the wholeness, right? And then anything's possible. So I found, you know, and going back to your very first question, is that the nervous system will decide what you are ready for, what you want to next create, what you next want to birth, right? And you can have any particular, I remember years ago, as my nervous system was healing, I was thinking about what I might next, I'd lived a quite a very socially reclusive life because I was so highly sensitive. I couldn't be around anybody with perfumes or harsh words or, you know, pollution, anything. I couldn't. And so I'd been indoors for a couple of years and I'd really not done anything. And so I was thinking about, where do I go from next? And suddenly my nervous system was having me booking Christmas party tickets. It was not on my plan, believe me. It was not at all part of my plan, but it was part of my nervous system that just said, that's the next step. So some of you might say that's intuition. It didn't feel like it came from an intuitive place. It came from a place of where my nervous system was available to do that step. So it wasn't my intuition that said, that's your next step, because I could have received that intuitively and my nervous system wasn't available. This was very much as like my nervous system was open and it had enough space to tolerate maybe the little bit of perturbation that was going to happen with me being around people for the first time in a few years, or me being around perfumes, or me being around food I couldn't eat, and how was I going to negotiate all those kind of social difficulties that I'd had. And my nervous system said, we're ready to give it a try.
Wow, that is so fascinating to me. I'm going to put, for everybody, I'm going to put the Embodied Presence Expansion Training on the notes, wherever I post this. It'll be in the notes so that you can go and explore that a little more. But I really love what you're saying about that, the nervous system. In a way, it's like, to me, I always feel like we don't have the control that we think we do. And if we pay attention, whether, you know, that's our nervous system, whether if we pay attention, then we are guided in some way. And I really love that you made that distinction between intuition and the nervous system, because I get a sense that when you are doing the nervous system work and you're really supporting, and it's supporting you, that intuition becomes, I don't know, clearer or more, you're more able to follow it with ease. Does that make sense?
Definitely more like, I mean, it becomes clearer too, but I think more than anything is that the trust starts to be established.
Yes.
And more than anything, you can follow it without having all of those second questions or letting the mind override, which quite often we do, right? We let, and I mean, I've even found that with the kind of people who I work with, you know, they're like, oh, I've been following you for years and really, but something, I just kept on finding a reason why not, you know, and that was because their nervous system was saying yes, but they weren't in that position yet where they were able to follow the openness in their nervous system. So now I can track that it's like, oh, I can do that. I'm ready for that. So, I guess that's the same with, inviting people into this training, which I would like to say, Aisha, it starts on the 13th of August. So
Okay.
please, come on in. There are
Yeah,
still places. So I really love to see some people come on in.
fabulous. Right. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. I mean, I could go on, and it actually went longer than I thought, but it's like that. When I get into a juicy subject, I think, oh, it'll be about 20 minutes, and then it just goes, and it's absolutely perfect. But thank you, Raquel Dubois, Embodied Presence Expansion Training. So please look that up, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you.
It's been a really delightful conversation. Thank you, Aisha. I could have spent ages talking too, so thank you.
Another time.